Ospi's Book of Wars against Jehovih, Chapter 36. 1. Two vice gods had Sudga, Brihat and Visvasrij. Next to these, Sudga's heavenly chief marshal, Atma, who had 4,000 marshals under him, and equally divided amongst them to command 1,000 million heavenly warring angels. Atma had authority over 30,000 generals and captains, to whom were allotted 2,000 million angels. 2. Chief of the heavenly generals were Shahara, Vasyam, Sukchi, Dev, Nasakij, Tavara, Watka, Shan, Dor, Hudhup, Nikish, Hajara, Wasgarom, Viji, Yatamas, Brahma, Goska, Fulowski, Amduhitri, Yaya Michma, Hajavar, Duth, Lobyam, Haigup, and Vawiska, and these falsely assumed the names of the ancient gods and lords of thousands of years before. 3. Sudga had said to them, that my age may be magnified before the newborn in heaven. Ye shall also magnify your own names by taking the names of gods and lords who are revered in heaven and earth, for all things are free unto you. But into none others do I give privileges to choose the names of the ancients. 4. Sudga then made the following his private counsel: Plauya, Vasista, Cairo, Spenista, Visper, Ishong, Bagwi, Lautha, Brihet, Gaia, Samern, Nice Witch, Yub, Sol, Don, Mungjo, Urvash, Sepentamanius, Bazista, and Vanaiti, and to each of them 10,000 attendants. 5. Then Sudga made two great captains, Varsa and Baktu, and he said unto them, 2,000 million angels have I allotted to go down to the earth and to the land of Vindu, to subdue mortals and have dominion over them permanently. And I divide the 2,000 million betwixt ye twain. But all other angels shall remain in my heavenly kingdom and work for me and embellish it and beautify my heavenly cities, especially my holy capital. 6. Now, when ye twain are permanent on the earth and secured in the temples and oracles, ye shall survey all the lands of Vindu and the cities, large and small, and all the people therein. And behold, all men shall be subdued unto my two names, Sudga and Dayaus. And when a city standeth, wherein the people worship any other god or lords, that city shall ye destroy, and all the people therein. City against city shall it be, man against man. For as I am the all-highest God of heaven, so will I be the God of earth and its Lord. And ye twain, in finding two cities to be destroyed, shall divide, one going with his angel warriors to one city, and the other to the other city. And ye shall inspire them against each other unto death. And when they are laid low, ye shall bring into the place to inhabit it my worshippers. 7. Thus descended to the earth the two destroying captain gods, Varsa and Baktu, with their 2,000 million angel warriors. And they spread out and about over the land of Vindu, where were many kingdoms and thousands of cities. And they came to mortals asleep or awake, and inspired them to havoc and destruction, for Sudga's sake. 8. And there were laid in ruins in 12 years 40,000 cities, of which 37 were great cities. And chief of these were Yadom, Wachhada, Savalaka, Hoste, Lumivi, Tadar, and Yigam, each of which contained more than 1 million souls, and some of them 2 millions. 9. In all of these, there were places of great learning and schools and temples of sacrifice. In Tidar, the roof of the temple was made of silver and copper and gold, and it had 1,000 columns of polished stone and 500 pillars to support the roof. The walls were covered with tapestry, painted with written words and histories of heaven and earth, and of the gods and lords and saviors of the ancients. Within the temple were 7 altars of sacrifice and 4,000 basins of holy water for baptismal rites. Within the walls of the temples were niches for 500 priests, for the confessions of sins and for receiving the money and cloth and fruits of the earth, contributed by the penitent for the remissions of their sins. Through the central passage within the temple drove the king in his golden chariot when he came for sacrifice, and the floor of the passage was laid with silver and gold. 10. In the center of the temple was a basin filled with water, and the size of the basin was equal to 20 lengths of a man. In the middle of the basin was a fountain throwing up water. And on the east and west and north and south sides of the basin were 4 pillars of polished stone, with stairs within them. And the tops of these pillars were connected by beams of inlaid wood of many colors, polished finely, which were called the Holy Ark of Su-Hagda. On the summit of the ark was a small house called the Voice of the Oracle, for here sat the king's interpreter of heaven and earth, the reader of visions. And the spirits of the dead appeared in the spray of the fountain, sometimes as stars of light, and sometimes in their own forms and features, and were witnessed by the multitude. 11. Within each of the 5 pillars was a sacred chamber, for benefit of the priests communing with angels. In the east pillar was an opening from top to bottom, a slat way, so the multitude could see through the pillar, which was hollow its entire height. This was occupied by the king's high priest or priestess, as the case might be, and this person had attained to adeptship, so that the angel could carry him up and down within the pillar, even to the top thereof, which was equal to 50 lengths of a man. And the multitude thus beheld him ascending and descending. 12. In the west pillar was a library of the temple, which contained a history of its important events for a period of 800 years, of the priest and high priest, and of the kings of the cities. 13. Next to the temple, which was called Traista, stood the house of learning, where congregated the wise men and women, skilled in philosophy and music and astronomy and mineralogy. The house was made of polished stone and wood interlocked, and in the front with 140 columns of polished stone and wood. Within the houses were the skins and bones of thousands of creatures, ancient and modern, which were classified and named, and with these were books of philosophy and history, all of which were free to the public 1 day in 7. Next to the house of learning was a temple of death, dedicated to all kinds of battles betwixt lions and men, tigers and men, and betwixt lions and tigers and elephants, and betwixt man and man. And so great was the temple of death that its seats could accommodate 300,000 men, women, and children. The temple was circular and without a roof over the arena, but the greatest of all buildings in Tidar was the king's palace, commonly called Temple of the Sun. This was also made of polished stone, and on the 4 sides had 800 columns of polished stone, and next to the columns were 50 pillars, on every side connected by arches 12 lengths high, and whereon rested a roof of wood and stone. And yet on this was surmounted another row of 400 columns of polished wood, inlaid with silver and gold. And these were connected to the top by other arches 10 lengths high, and on these another roof, and on the top of this a dome covered with gold and silver and copper. From the arena to the dome, the height was 28 lengths, and the base of the dome across was 16 lengths. To enter the temple from the west was a chariot roadway, so that the king and his visitors could drive up into the arena of the palace in their chariots. But as for the interior of the king's palace, a whole book might be written in the description thereof, and yet not tell half of its richness and beauty and magnificence. 14. Besides these great buildings, there were 450 temples of darkness, dedicated to the spirits of dead. These were without any openings save the door, and when the communers were within, and the door shut, they were without light. In the midst of these temples, spirits and mortals congregated, and the spirits taught mortals the art of magic, of making seeds grow into trees and flowers, of producing serpents by force of the will, of carrying things through the air, casting sweet perfumes and casting foul smells, of casting virus to one's enemies and inoculating him with poison unto death, of finding things lost, of bringing money to the poor and flowers and food to the sick, of entering the dead sleep, and of becoming unconscious to point by force of the will. 15. Nor could any man or woman attain to be a priest in the temple of Triesta until he mastered all the degrees in the temples of darkness. 16. The angels of Sudga decided to destroy the city, and accordingly, they inspired a war betwixt it and the city of Yadam, which was second unto it in its magnificence, and possessed of temples and palaces like unto it also. Yeah, but to describe one of these great cities was to describe the other as to mortal glory. For 700 years had these cities lain in peace with each other, half a day's journey apart on the great river, Uvisage in the valley of Rajawicha. 17. And the captain god Varsa chose one city, and the captain god Baktu chose the other city. And each of them took from their 1,000 million angel warriors a sufficient number, and inspired 2 great cities unto everlasting destruction. Even as mortals turn savage beasts into an arena to witness them tear and flay each other, even so sat these captain gods in their heavenly chariots, witnessing the 2 great cities in mortal combat. And when one had too much advantage, the angel hosts would turn the tide or let them rest a while, then urge them to it again, holding the game in such even balance as would ensure the greatest possible havoc to both. 18. 8 years these battles lasted, and hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children were slain. And when thus the great cities were reduced, the gods let loose the band of death, whose angel office was to carry poison virus from the rotten dead and inoculate the breath of the living, and then in desperate madness make mortals fire their cities to keep them from falling into other hands. And in 8 years, the great cities with their mighty temples were turned to ruin and to dust. And of the people left, only the ignorant few, starving, helpless wanderers, could tell the tale of what had been. 19. Sudga had said, all knowledge amongst mortals is inimical to the gods in heaven. Therefore, I will destroy all knowledge on the earth. And this was the same doctrine maintained by Tain, god of Japheth. 20. In such manner proceeded the captain gods of Sudga all over the land of Vindu, laying low all kingdoms and cities, and places of sacrifice and places of learning. And in 100 years, the mighty people of Vindu were reduced to beggary and to scattered tribes of wanderers. The great canals were destroyed, and the upper and lower country became places of famine and barrenness. And in the valleys and on the mountains, and in the abandoned fields and in the wildernesses, lay the bones and skulls of millions of the human dead. And lions and tigers came and prowled about in the ruined walls of the fallen temples and palaces. Nor were there left in all of the land a single library or book, or the art of making books, or anything to show what the great history had been. 21. Thus perished the Vedic language, the language of song and poetry, and of great oratory, save in a small degree, such as was preserved by the remnants of faithists who had escaped through all these generations, still in secret worshiping the Great Spirit. 22. Hear ye next of Osiris and his dominions, and of Arabinia and Parsia and Helest.